All right, guys, welcome back to Course of Action. I have a great new author from Down Under who is joining us today live from his hotel room as he's making the busy transition through life and work and writing and all that. Nathan Best, how are you?
I'm very good, Jeff. Thanks very much for having me on.
Yeah, of course, man. I appreciate you taking out the time. And I know you're busy. You're on the road right now. As I said, you're right out of your hotel room. But, it's awesome, to sit here and chat and get to know each other and hear about your Battleborn series and your time in the Australian Air Force.
Yeah, very much. Thank you very much for that. And yeah, I love to. Loved my time in the service. It was good. Air Force, as we know, is the best of the three services. And so yes, I'm still a reservist these days. So 35. I'm about to click over 35 years all up. So and I started writing nearly 40 years ago. So
Wow.
and Battleborn is the new Damien Hunter series is really just a culmination of that. So.
So, what did you do for the 30 years in the Royal Australian Air Force? You said you're a communicator. What is that?
Yeah, so basically, we ran communications centers and we worked with a lot of radio and a lot of high frequency radio and things like that. So we used to like back in the day, back in the early '90s. I joined in '90, so was a permanent in the Air Force up until about 2001, and then got out and became a reservist and went off and did other things
So, being a communicator for basically
all around the world to aircraft, which was very good. Um, so yeah, and then sort of in the '90s, they sort of introduced like a IT sort of stream into our mustering as well, and which wasn't really my thing. So I sort of stayed in the communicator sort of world, and I sort of liked that sort of way. So yeah, then I transited out of the permanents in around about 2001, and I deployed to Iraq and Kuwait in 2008 and 2009. I worked up in Baghdad there, and then down into Ali Al Salim in Kuwait. And then yeah, I work with a combat survival training school now. So yeah, so basically I still do communications for them, and a whole heap of other like sort of side stuff that you do for combat survival. And I've been with them. I'm their longest serving person ever, basically because I'm a reservist now, and you don't move. So I've done nearly 22 years with them now. So yeah, it's a very good unit. It's like the old military is probably the
Mm.
best way to describe it. It's like everyone just gets in, everyone works hard. You work till the work's finished, and then you go and have a sleep, and you work whenever. It doesn't matter. So that really works for me. So that kept that really nice sort of flavour through my whole service career because I've had just a very interesting career. And and yeah, even like when I did my deployment stuff, I worked with the Americans majority of that time, and they were great. I loved working with the Americans; they were really good, mostly with the American Air Force, American Army, and they were all brilliant. They looked after us stunningly well, and they always were like involved us in everything. They thanked us for being, especially when I was in Baghdad with them, which was great. Um, so yeah, so a good nearly 35 years. So it might be coming to the end now. I think 35 years is probably enough, and I can only squeeze so much into my life. But so yeah, so communications is my sort of thing in the service, and I've literally enjoyed my entire time. I love the military. It's absolutely brilliant.
Well, communications is so important. I mean, we know it is calm here, and there's a lot of
Mm.
IT in there now. But of course, it's hard to avoid that nowadays with IT being such a focal point in the way we just conduct business every single day. Um, it's even like that on the battlefield now. Like, there's so many things that are interconnected. And what was it like being deployed? You said you enjoyed it being with Americans, but what was it really like being deployed um, as an outside branch of service from another country coming in? I know we both speak English, but different kind of dialect. What was it like, kind of working with the Americans when it came to your job?
Yeah, so it was I suppose one of the main differences, which has been around for a very, very long time, is there are more American servicemen than there are Australian servicemen. So there's much more manpower. So where I would do like 5 to 6 jobs, and the American service would have probably 4 people that would do those jobs. So had a lot more responsibility, a lot more to do in that time. So but the speak was reasonably similar, and it was quite interesting. So my family originates in a sort of backward sort of way back into Texas and into the southern states of America. So it was actually good to actually talk to some of them, and sort of see where they come from.
Mm.
And Amarillo in Texas is roughly where my family comes from, in that sort of area.
Okay.
And I met an American just at the dining facility who was from Amarillo. So it was actually quite good to just talk to him,
Yeah,
in that
small
sort of
world.
social way. So it was excellent. Yeah, very
Yeah.
small world. So it was actually excellent to do. So we used to socialize with them, at the dining facilities, and things like that. And they always just accepted us. And it was just, it was like we were just part of, the whole response to to the insurgency at that time. But in manner of the way we spoke and stuff like that, we're not too far away from each other, like realistically. We have our nuances and stuff like that. The only strange, who was it? George Bush was there when I was there, and they weren't pulling any punches then. It was like quite an amazing thing. So they shut down pretty well everything,
Oh yeah.
and as you do, protect your presidents.
Hmm.
And whereas our prime minister could turn up and no one would probably notice, realistically. Um, but yeah, it was quite interesting because at that same time I had a medical emergency happening with one of my crew. So the Americans had pretty well locked off the entire Victory Barracks. So Bush could come in and do whatever he was going to do. I never saw him, but I knew he was there. So then we had to negotiate our way through all of the roadblocks and checkpoints that the Americans had put up, everywhere, to get to medical. And so it was they took a fair bit of convincing, but they let us through, which was good. Um, but Australians have a strange level of complacency in a weird way. It's not really complacency, but it appears like it's complacency. We're very, very relaxed, in
Mm.
that sort of more sort of theatre where we don't really worry particularly about danger an awful lot. It's quite strange. So to convince, an Australian to put his armour on or put his helmet on or something, it takes a fair bit to do. But they convince us eventually, that sort of stuff. It's like, that stuff's heavy. But they were great. They across from where our headquarters was, there was I can't remember what it's called, but where the American people donate, golf clubs and golf balls, all that sort of stuff for the troops and stuff. And we had one of those across from us, and they regularly came across and they said, "Oh, would you like some golf balls and a set of golf clubs?" Like, wow, we never got that from Australia. So the support of the American people was amazing. In the fact that this things you should just turn up. Like the Hershey company sent a whole heap of stuff, and I'd actually like Hershey, to be honest, but because it's acquired taste for us, because our chocolate's very different. But they just sent a whole container load of it to us, and I was like, wow, quite amazing, in that real nice sort of almost family sort of feel, which was excellent for us. So,
Did you ever get exposed to the famous Rip It energy drinks?
was it Rip It? There was Monster was huge when I was there. I got introduced to chewing tobacco, which trust me, is not my thing,
Did we introduce
because
you
that
to
was
that?
everywhere. Yeah, and it was like, that's not my thing,
Shame on us.
and yeah. But I was amazed how big chewing tobacco is. Like, it was amazing, how commonly used it is, and that's like all your flavors and all that sort of stuff. So, but yeah, Monster was massive when I was there, and they're the cans that you can't get in a lot of countries in the world because they're full, they are full on, and they're a liter cans. So, but I got introduced to root beer. That was good, but very low, too sweet for me. Those sort of foods, because we just ate American food, and the American, whatever was brought into us,
Mm.
is what we ate. So, and I used to have to walk 2 kilometer round trip to eat every day. So whenever I wanted to eat, I had to walk 2 kilometers. So
Wow.
because the dining facility was so far away from where we were, but it was good to get out and have a walk. So,
Yeah, get your exercise in. Yeah. So is
yeah.
is some of our food that you kind of were exposed to was a little more sweet and salty than you're used to, or what was kind of the difference in the cuisine?
Yeah, so they're almost polar opposites.
Really?
It's like it's quite strange. So in Australia, like, salad is probably the best way to describe it. So in Australia, salad is, well, we see that as salad. It's like there's lots of leafy greens. They're very, very fresh. Like tomatoes are different. Very, very quite different. Whereas in the American side, in my experience, a lot of it had been sitting in a freezer for a very long period of time. Granted that was in was the Middle East, so it had been sitting in a container for probably a year.
Yeah.
But just the type and just the way it's grown, I think, is just different to how we grow it. So, and meats are very different as well. Like we don't boil meat. I think we boil like one or two types of meat, and that's all we do. Whereas, I sort of experienced that boiling of like a steak, and then you throw it on the grill, which we found really weird because it changes the texture of the steak.
Yeah.
So we literally just grill that. We'll just throw it
But
on
you
and
know
grill it, or you bake
that
it or whatever.
method of doing the steak here is not that common. That sous
Oh,
vide
good,
way where
brilliant.
you deep it, you plastic wrap it, and then you dunk it in hot water and it cooks for a period of time, and then you throw it on the grill just to get that sear. That's not all that common.
Oh, good, excellent.
Yeah.
Because I'll
So
actually be in
like I've
America
never done it
in a couple
before.
of weeks.
Yeah, I've never done it before.
Oh, that's good.
So when I go out to
Yeah,
eat or I cook a steak here at the rest or I get the house, it's it's on a flat iron, it's on the grill or something like that. That method of doing
yeah,
it's catching on. It's a little more common, but it's not as common as you'd think it would be.
yeah. Because it doesn't really taste any good. It takes the flavour away, I think, from the meat, which is bizarre. So, but like meatloaf, we don't really have meatloaf. Those sort of things,
That's okay.
and
Meatloaf's not that great anyway.
it's not that really great. Basically, it's a cheap food in reality.
Yeah.
But your sauces are very salty or very sweet. You're like I really couldn't drink, your sodas and stuff because they were just too sweet for me,
Really?
and it's too much. Yeah, because we don't eat as much as Americans do. Like we eat probably half of what you guys do.
Wow.
So the portions are way too big. They're like 2 people, 3 people can eat that one portion for us. Um, and like the size of your drinks, we don't drink that much, and we live in an extremely hot country. Um, but we will not eat. Oh, sorry, not drink this huge amount of soda which you guys will drink. Um, and I don't really drink it anyway, so I drink either water or beer or whatever I sort of drink. So,
Yeah.
but that sort of soda drinking is not really in there, so I didn't have to worry about it too much. But and the amount of Gatorade and things like that, those sort of drinks, which is phenomenal. And but when I was when I was in Baghdad, they actually removed Gatorade because you're not going to get it in a liter bottle. So they were removing it and getting rid of it because it was the amount that was being drunk was too high, and so they started to remove it from the defect, and there was massive complaint, that it was going. So because people drank it all the time, and yeah,
Because
quite weird,
water's
but
boring.
that's the sorry.
Just drinking straight water is boring. So
It is
people
boring.
like
Yeah,
to
it does
mix it up
become
with
boring.
Gatorade. Like I don't. What I do with
Yeah.
Gatorade, especially if like I'm sick or something, is I
Hmm.
dilute Gatorade. So I'll
Oh
empty
yeah.
half of a Gatorade out into a cup and then I'll fill both of them up with water. So I'll have a diluted
Yeah.
mix of
Perfect.
water and Gatorade. It lasts a little longer because Gatorade does have a lot of sugar in it. And like
Mm.
I don't drink a lot of soda. I drink a lot of water and tea, and I don't sweeten either one of them up. So I don't drink a lot of soda, but there is like it's very common here in the States to go to a restaurant and you'll get a glass of soda. I mean, and
Yep.
it's a glass. It's not a cup. It's a glass, and they'll fill it up with ice and soda, and you'll get free refills.
Wow. So we don't do any of that. We don't do free refills of anything. So so you would have to pay for more if you wanted more soda or coffee or whatever you're drinking. You have to pay for another one, and so that slows you down pretty. When you're paying for it, it slows you down even more.
Yeah,
Um,
we should do
so
that
which is
here.
not a bad thing really.
Yeah,
Yeah, probably a good idea.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
but yeah, so the foods are quite different in that sort of weird way. Although a lot of American culture is embedded in Australian culture, because realistically, the two countries are quite close together in reality, and have been for a very long time. Like in certain way, even though our different countries have different cultures and that sort of stuff, there is a blending in the center. In certain ways, we dress very similar, and we talk similar. Just the accents are really different.
Mm,
That's so the main thing. So the blending of culture is quite high now. I think social media obviously has blended that in because countries have started not to matter. I don't think, and you've literally moved into a almost a homogenous sort of world, whereas and people sort of really, what I've noted is people want to hang on to their nation now, and they'll put that in their social media, so they don't get lost, in just the generic world that, sort of is becoming. So, which Americans are bringing it. The love of America their patriotism is amazing, absolutely amazing. And a lot of other countries around the world could learn from it, and that's why the way you support your armed services as well is just phenomenal. And I remember traveling to Guam many years ago, and they were welcome because obviously Guam's a big transit hub for a lot of troops coming in and out.
Yep.
And the way they had signs up everywhere that were like welcoming them, back to American soil, and the flags everywhere, and they basically thanking them for their service continuously. Those sort of things. It was amazing. We don't experience that in Australia. So it's becoming a little bit more normal now, but it's nowhere near to the level that the Americans keep it, which I think is absolutely phenomenal. It's very well done on your part.
Well, thank you. Unfortunately, there are places here in our country that don't reciprocate it the same. So
Yep.
like every country, we have our challenges. We have our good apples and our bad apples. But for the most part, yeah, there's an unconditional love and appreciation for our military, and I do appreciate it. I did 12 years in the Air Force, and I got thanked. And almost any time I walked out in public with my uniform on, I got thanked for my service.
Yeah.
It's not necessary, but people just see it, and they feel that admiration. They don't know who you are or understand what you did or know the larger impact to their lives, but they know that you are willing to do what they wouldn't do.
Mm-hmm.
So they go
Yep.
out there and they say something, and it's nice. I've had a couple of dinners bought for me and things like that. And, but for most part, just that gesture, just that going out of their way, even if it was like interrupting your lunch with your friends to say, hey, sorry guys, hate to interrupt, but I just want to thank you for your service. I appreciate it and love you guys. And they just turn around and walk away, and it's like,
Yeah. Wow.
That's pretty cool. People will hang an American flag outside their home just because they can. Not because they served
Yeah.
or
We don't.
anything like that. They will just do it
Yeah.
because I can, damn it.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And we see that in like a smattering in Australia. You don't really see a lot of Australian flags around, things like that. When you do see one though, you take note of it, and it's a nice thing to see. And yeah, and sort of almost reserve it for specific days, like Anzac Day, obviously for us, which is coming up, say a couple of weeks away, actually almost a month away, a little bit less than a month away. It's sort of that big sort of day, where it used to originally be just to celebrate, not basically celebrate, the fallen from World War One, then it became World War Two, and then they basically morphed it into a day where it's for any of the fallen, from any of the wars, but also, I have a slightly different take on it, which is a personal take, but where I don't see it as a day for me in particular. I see it as a day to commemorate, the fallen from my point of view as a serviceman. And like I don't wear my medals on the Anzac Day because I don't believe it's not about me.
Right.
It's about the respect of those who went before me, and which is my grandfather actually, who served in World War II through the Pacific Theatre. He had exactly the same thing, but we've never spoken about it. So he would go to Anzac Day, never wear his medals because it was about him remembering those who didn't come back with him. Because the attrition rate was obviously very high during World War II. So, and we never spoke about that, but for some reason I have the exact same thoughts. So quite strange in that sort of way. So I just keep my medals in, a little cabinet, and I'm happy with that. It's fine by me. But yeah, so I just go and people do thank you, on Anzac Day and things like that. And I always do the dawn service. I'm up at 4 o'clock in the morning, do the service and, that sort of thing. So Australians seem to, focus on a day where they will, celebrate, basically the sacrifice of servicemen coming before them. So, which is quite nice. And Anzac Day is very big here. I'm not sure what your day would be. Is it Remembrance Day for you? It's not Remembrance Day.
We have
your day?
Memorial Day that we do at the end of May. Memorial Day is kind of that day to remember those that have done things, in some of those battles in previous history. And then we have what we call Veterans Day, which is in November, and that's more of a general think of someone who has served kind of day, living or present or past, So we focus more on Memorial Day as a day of remembering those past battles and the people who have fallen for it, and then you flash forward to Veterans Day, and it's more so about anybody who has served, the day of appreciation.
Okay, we basically combine that realistically into a single day, which is 25th of April, so it's not too far away. It's sort of a bit less than a month away, so it'll be good. And I'll actually be cruising across to America for that day, so it'll be sort of quite nice. So
Nice. Well, we
gonna
like our
cruise
days
across to
here.
Hawaii.
We
Yeah,
we have a day for everything here.
yeah. Well, we have quite a lot of public holidays, but it's I don't know how many. I think we got like 10 in a year where they're public holidays. I think 8 or 10, something like that, whatever. So to celebrate whatever, so whatever is being celebrated at the time. So and I think it's good for a country to do that. You have those days where you'll have some people just take the day off and go camping, or they'll do nothing or whatever. Whereas a core of people will go and they'll take that day and they'll celebrate whatever that day is technically for. Sort of a little bit more community, a little bit nicer in that sort of way. So it's not, in countries that don't do it, it's sort of, they must be sort of that weird in their community sort of sense. But maybe they do it in a different way. They don't do it on
Yeah.
weekends or whenever. Just not exposed to that sort of culture. So
Yeah. So let's you've been in for almost 35 years, active duty and as a reservist, working in comm. Now you're at the Combat Survival Training School, and how does your experience in the Royal Australian Air Force in all those years play into kind of your writing and how you kind of wanted to go in the direction as a writer?
So, as you know, being in the service is quite formative. Like, it forms you and it sort of shapes you. And the experiences that you have are just, you can't get those in civilian life. So I used to go and basically volunteer for almost anything, and I'd go, I'll go do that, or or if I saw an experience, I'd go, that's probably going to be good. Like, I'll give you an example. That back in the 90s, I was in exercise in Western Australia, and someone said, "Oh, there's an F-111 doing," when we had pigs in the glory days of having F-111, which are gone now because they're way too expensive and quite old. But an amazing machine, absolutely amazing. And they had to get rid of all their fuel, and so they were going, "Oh, they're going to do some runs along the airfield and whatever." So I went out and stood in the center of the airfield with a couple of other people. And it's like, not many other people turned up, and it was like, oh. And you saw this F-111, this dot way in the distance, right? And he was doing a proper dump and burn, and he had his wings folded back, and it was like, wow, this is going to be loud. And he went straight over the center line, and then when he got to us, he pulled into a vertical, and then he lit his afterburners, and it's just flame and stuff, or you could feel the heat and the flick of the afterburner underneath you. So so experiences like that you don't get in civilian life. You don't get the experiences of, say, during my deployment, if you're lucky in civilian life, you don't get to experience what it's like when a rocket goes off, or a mortar, or what it sounds like when shooting is. That constant, basically 24-hour gunfire of Baghdad. Those sort of things. So all of those experiences, and and riding in aircraft and helicopters and armored vehicles and those sort of things, and just having all those bits and pieces around you all the time. So what I did was I grabbed all of those experiences and sort of held them in my head, and I've held them in my head for a long time. So I started writing when I was 10 years old, and I wrote my first, technically a novel, as a 10-year-old, which is this is basically a rip-off of an American author's book with Lawrence Cortese, long dead now. This is from 1980, and I still have his book, and it sits on my desk as sort of inspiration, because it was my first novel was like 4 pages long, mate. It really wasn't that good, and it was probably a rip-off of his book, but it didn't matter. I was 10, so it didn't matter. Yeah. So I wrote the entire time, and I wrote a little bit of sci-fi, and that sort of when you're just practicing and playing and stuff like that. So and then as I started to move sort of through into the 2000s, I wrote my first novel in 99, 2000, and it was sort of a little bit, it's supposed to write a lot of adventure sort of stuff, and that's never been published. A lot of your first novels are never published, obviously, because you're practicing. You are really writing the art, because, as you know, writing a novel takes effort, but it also takes practice.
Sure does.
And it does, and as we know, it takes many hours of just practicing before you produce something that's actually worthy of publication.
Mm-hmm.
So I've never published my first 4 to 5 novels because I think they're good, but they're practice, and then I indie published my first 3 novels. But I'd always had this idea in the background. They were like young adult fiction adventure, and then I did a sci-fi military book. And then, but I'd always had this idea in the back of my head that I wanted to have a central character. And so I thought, okay, so why don't I use my actual experience, that live, I know what it smells like, I know what it sounds like, I know what it feels like, and then create, that sort of character. So and then when I moved into the sort of, and it rattled around in my head, as ideas do, for quite a long time, and it sort of sat there and sat there and sat there. And I couldn't get a new outlet for it. I couldn't quite work out the next sort of jump. And so I had a very interesting experience when back in probably, and it's interesting to me, obviously, because this is really how the character of Damien Hunter began. And a mate of mine was practicing his pistol drills, and we're outfield, and I was watching him, and he was just doing his drills, and both in the holster, out of the holster, aim on, those sort of things, walk forward, all that sort of stuff, and for whatever reason, watching him do that triggered the idea and the name that became, and the character who became Damien Hunter, and that was the first trigger. And then all of my experiences and all the things I'd seen and experienced and heard about, stuff like that, all then suddenly started to click into place. And then I realized, like, well, I thought, basically, when I looked at it, I thought I was trying to create a character from just my experiences. But for someone like, say, Damien Hunter, I didn't have all of the experience required for that character. Mm-hmm. So that guy, I won't mention his name, he's now one of my advisors. So for those things that I don't have. And so I have 4 advisors who help me out, and they are actually all embedded into the Damien Hunter character. Because they openly just give me their experiences. Like 2 have served in combat, whereas I never got, that combat feel, whereas they have gone out into the Afghanistan, they've gone contractor work, those sort of things, which I never did. So they openly just give me their experiences. As you know, as a writer, you can take that, visualize it, and then you can produce it into your work, and you weld it in, those sort of nice ways. So the sort of Damien Hunter is 5 people in reality. And when I wrote it, like when I came up with his character, I didn't realize the background of one of my advisors, like, at all. I'd known him for years, but I didn't know his full background. And then I realized after a little while, when I discussed it with him, his background was almost Damien Hunter in the weirdest of ways. So because Damien Hunter is a private military contractor, and he'd done all of that, and he'd done some amazing stuff off grid that I didn't know about. So I used their experiences plus mine, and to write through the series. So and that's why my publisher calls it an action thriller or action series, whereas I call it more of a military sort of thriller, which sort of fits a bit better. But in Australia, you write military thriller on top of something, and people probably won't buy it. But you write action, and probably people will buy it.
Really?
It's just that different level of, it's just that different level. Like they sort of, like a lot of military fiction and stuff doesn't sell very well in Australia. It sells okay. I mean, not brilliantly. Not like it does sort of the American or UK markets, which to get into those for an Australian author, you've got to sell quite good and well in Australia first. And then, basically get some street cred, and then you would push out into those 2 markets. And obviously, as you know, the mecca is the American market, because you have so many people. And if 20% or 10% of Americans buy your book, you've made a particularly good living.
Oh yeah.
In reality.
When you can slap the military thing on just about anything and people will go buy it. Like I had to explain to my dad years ago, he bought a flashlight for like $100 and was like, Jeff, this is a good flashlight. It's a military grade flashlight. I was like, you need to go return that. That thing is probably just a total piece of shit. Like, let me tell you, let me explain to you what military grade is, Dad. And I showed him a few things, and I said, this is like the 5th version of this that I've gotten because it sucks. It breaks because it's cheap. And I was like, so when it says military grade, that is a marketing tactic to get you to spend your money, and it worked. And from then on, he's like, okay. So now he doesn't go for that anymore. But that people here in the States, you can slap that on things and people will Oh, military grade, got to be the best thing in the world. Military book,
Of
oh,
course,
I
and
love it. I mean, you can
yeah,
slap that on things here, and so it's surprising to hear that um, from you, saying that Australia, if you slap that on there, they won't take to it as well. But action thriller is a different
yeah,
different way.
yeah. But strange but true. It's the same thing, just repackaged. I suppose it's like when a book lands in another country, it has a different cover on it.
Yeah,
Like say my cover of Battleborn has, a soldier walking through a sandstorm, with a CH-53 lifting off behind him, and a light machine gun hanging over his shoulders. In another country, they mightn't like that cover, so they'll put a new cover on it, for example. Those sort of things. So, and like Battleborn, really, when I pick the titles for each sort of novel I write, the title describes the entire book, because I come up with the title before I come up with anything. I have a very backward way of writing in certain ways, which is quite strange, but the title always comes first. So, but yeah, sort of all like you will see, when I do author talks and things like that at libraries and stuff like that, I actually share some of the personal experiences which are in Battleborn, and like the main character Damien Hunter, he's obsessed with ice cream. Like he loves ice cream, and because one, I like ice cream, but it helps him cope. And when I got to the end of my sort of 9 months in the Middle East, I was pretty well at the end of my tether. So the only thing keeping me going was Baskin and Robbins ice cream. There's cookies and cream ice cream, and I would eat far too much of that at lunch and dinner. But it made me happy because it was sweet and that sort of natural comfort food. So
yeah.
I put that into him, and at the start of the novel there. Um, so he's just in the shower basically trying to come back on mission and get sorted because they're just about to go out on mission, and that's actually a personal experience from my first day in Baghdad, where finally finished work at whatever ungodly hour it was, and jumped in the shower and sitting there going, what the hell have I done? Why did I volunteer to come here? Those sort of things. So in every single book has my own personal experiences, welded in, and if you know me well enough, those people who know me well will go, that's actually Nathan there. That's an experience from myself. Um, and I'll weld that through every single book. So the second book, which is called Ghost in the Fog, will be out in August this year. The third one, which is called Long Surrender, will be out next year. So they're the first three books of because it's a 10-book series basically. So, and my publishing company has picked up the first three, and then see how they sell, and then it'll be negotiation from there, as it always is for a publishing company. It's just the way life works.
Yeah.
So, which was sort of the joy of indie publishing, because when I did my first three as indie, you didn't have to negotiate with anybody except yourself.
Yeah.
And then then you put them out, and then you just did your thing. So, and I enjoyed both. I'm glad I've done both types of publishing, because doing indie, I learned a lot about publishing. Because you got to do it yourself, and then obviously I actually was lucky enough to get a publishing house interested in me in Australia called Big Sky Publishing, and they're quite large in Australia. They actually do a lot of military non-fiction, which is quite good, and so that was a good experience as well, because I learned a different side of publishing, the really hard commercial side, which I wasn't really prepared for, but nobody is. So I'm still learning that commercial pressure, and that's fine, so I've already produced my 3 books in my contract, and they've been sent off, so I don't have much pressure anymore. Yeah, so we're sort of circling right back. So yeah, my experiences are literally embedded in everything. Even the sounds and the smells and all that sort of stuff. That's real from either me or one of my advisors who serve. So
Okay, so let's talk a spoiler-free description of Battleborn, and then I'll follow up after that with a little teaser of what's to come after that in the second and third books, as you said. So, spoiler-free description of Battleborn.
no problem. So Battleborn, as I said before, is based around Damien Hunter. So he is a private military contractor. He's an ex-combat controller. So I chose a combat controller because you don't see combat controllers used very much in fiction, and I've got good mates who are combat controllers, and they do a stunning job, absolutely stunning job on the battlefield. So I chose him at his background. So he's an ex-combat controller, works for basically, he works for one of those shadow private military contractors. So they're not the big ones you hear about, Blackwater and those. I don't think Blackwater's around, but those sort of guys. That's not them. It's the other niche guys. And these companies are around. So that's called the Taipan organization. They started off in the wars of Africa in the 60s, and they sort of are a very, very niche contractor. And they take any contract that no one else will take. So all high risk, high value, and they do anything basically for money. Small 3-man teams, and they're basically Taipan with a number. So Damien's team is Taipan 1-6. So they're currently embedded in Afghanistan in Battleborn. So and Damien is a broken individual from far too many years of combat. He's got a good, his other two team are very, very good. They're keeping him going and keeping him on mission and making sure that he stays on target the whole time, because he's an extremely high-end operator. And you have to be high-end to be part of Taipan, basically. So they're in Tarankat and in Afghanistan, and that's where their base is. They're embedded with the Australian Special Forces there. And they're given a mission to support the Dutch, when the Dutch Special Forces, and they go to basically take on an Afghani warlord, so who's in the Chora Valley. So basically it's a mission that Taipan 1-6 don't normally do, because basically it's a combat control mission, and they're not interested in it. Why would they want to do a combat control? They're a HVT guys and those sort of things. So automatically they don't want to do the mission they're assigned to do. So they have that nice little negativity in there. So basically the Dutch will go into Chora Valley, right up the end of Chora Valley, to the north of it there. And basically their job is either to kill or capture the Afghani warlord and take him out. And that's the whole premise of it. But the Afghani warlord knows they're coming. So because it's Afghanistan, and as we know, everybody knows everybody's business. That is Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. So basically what it does then, it goes quite wrong. For the Dutch, basically the Afghanis fight back and defend what is theirs. So and basically then Damien Hunter has to link up with the Dutch, because he's now starting to get overrun. And then they have to do a fighting retreat, basically, away from the Afghanis, and try to get to a pickup area where they can actually be picked up. And that constantly moves. So because I write fast, free-flowing action, it is literally start to finish, no breathing for the reader. It's a continuous flow. But to add a little bit more interest into it, because it is a series of 10 novels, there is another contractor there. So he appears in other books. He's planned to appear in other books. So, and he's an ex-French Foreign Legion sniper and interrogator. And he is literally in that proper niche world. So his name's René Toussaint. And he is in that niche world of they do not care about contracts. So he works for a Russian contractor. Before Wagner became sort of popular, everyone knew who they were. I'd created this pretty well unknown Russian contractor, and they do anything. It doesn't matter. And they don't care who it is, what it is, doesn't matter. So they're that sort of, I suppose, the bad guy of the good. And Taipan are not squeaky clean, trust me, at all. So he then starts to hunt Damien embedded into the Afghani retreat from Afghanis. He's now hunting Damien on the way through, because he's getting paid more money to go and do that. So that culminates obviously in the end, which I won't give to you, obviously, because it's good. Not to give the end. Yeah, that's exactly right. So it is literally from start to finish, rolling action thriller for about 370, 380 pages. Highly accurate. So I pride myself on accuracy as well, although interesting enough, my publisher wants me to reduce my accuracy slightly, because they find it slightly slower. But what it does, I suppose, which is I can sort of see it from their point of view, it broadens the audience slightly. Because if you don't know, what a BATS-D terminal is, and don't know that that's a Link 16 terminal, which is written in Battleborn, some readers will go, I don't understand that. So it stops them, and they either try and work it out or it slows down. So I've had to sort of drop it slightly, but when they change a mag or when they do any of that sort of stuff, it is as if it was there. So, and how weapons fire and how helicopters work and that sort of stuff. And I've got lucky enough, like I've got mates who they're on Chinooks and they're on Black Hawks, and we're getting Black Hawks again, thankfully, and getting rid of the MRH90. I've been on Chinooks, MRH90s, Black Hawks, all those sort of things. So I know what they feel like and sound like, that smell of the fuel and hydraulic oil that's coming out of all of them. The burnt Avtor at the back, and the feel of the air from around you. So that's all in there as well. So and like the smells of Tarank out of there, how a weapon feels when you touch it, that's there, and that adds in that nice level of realism to it. And that's sort of the feedback I've got. I've had some veterans who unfortunately can't read it. Like they start reading it, but it gets too real for them.
Yeah.
So then they have to stop, which is unfortunate. And I do give them a disclaimer before that, saying you need to be very aware that this might trigger you. So in the end, you've got to look after each other. So
absolutely.
So that's there for them. And so that's basically Battleborn in a very sort of loose sort of nutshell there. But literally high levels accuracy. Obviously the villages and stuff I use aren't real. They're just made. They're just invented that sort of stuff because you still have to be quite careful with how you do stuff. So I'm very hard on helicopters. So anyone who likes helicopters, I'm very hard on them. And that's almost a theme through all of them, is that hardness on helicopters. So because I love helicopters, absolutely love them. And I love riding them. I love everything about them, but they are a vulnerable machine, completely vulnerable. So they cop a flogging, pretty well for the whole way. So, but high levels of accuracy and like everything is as close as I can get within that fiction space to as much of reality as I can try and get it, without it, being a documentary, that sort of way. So, and that's come sort of nicely back through readers as well, saying, that the level of technical accuracy is very high. So that's sort of Battleborn.
So
without spoilers, obviously.
What's in the future for it? Books 2 and 3. Give us a quick synopsis of what maybe might be in store, spoiler free.
Yeah, so the second novel is called Ghost in the Fog. It comes out in August this year in Australia. And then it'll be on Amazon and those sort of things, so you can pick it up there. But so Damien has basically left Taipan at the end of Battleborn. So use Battleborn as a vehicle to create the character of Damien Hunter, and sort of push him through. And then Ghost of the Fog is a pause almost in his sort of life where he has escaped to the Russian Arctic. So he's then working in the Russian oil and gas industry, which is notoriously hard. So he's hiding. He doesn't want anyone to know where he is. He doesn't want to deal with human beings. That sort of, basically he is suffering from acute PTSD in reality. So he has embedded himself in one of the harshest work environments that he could think of. And so he's there now. Unfortunately for him, because it's a novel, and an action novel, he then is basically, there's a Chechen separatist group who then decide they want to attack the gas platform which he is on. So they want to take it over and blow it up, and blow up a floating gas production ship as well, which is just about 50 miles to the south of that. So he then gets caught up in that terrorist act and then has to basically come back and comes and gets himself sort of back into that combat fold again, and sort of realizes that it's a comfortable shell for him to sit in. Then he has to sort of fight his way clear, and Taipan know that he's there because Taipan don't let anybody go. So they've been keeping an eye on him the whole time, and they know he's there because you never know when you might need an asset somewhere. And so another Taipan team comes in to try and sort out the terrorist act. And I've got alpha teams, got Russian alpha teams and stuff like that before Russia was unpopular, because I wrote this before Russia was unpopular again. And basically it's the same sort of running battle, and they're off the gas platform and into remote, Arctic in reality. So that sort of goes to the fog. And what I've designed it to do is bring him closer and closer back to coming into Taipan, because Taipan obviously want him back because he's an extremely high-end operator.
I really love the title.
And pushing it. Sorry?
I really love the title, Ghost of the Fog.
It's ghosts, as in
Ghosts of the Fog.
How I say it. Yeah, so how I say it, I miss the S often, but it's actually an S on the end of ghosts. It's just the way I say it.
I like it.
My publisher did the same thing for 6 months. was like, is it Ghost or is it Ghost? It's like, it's Ghost. He
It's
goes, yeah,
plural.
Ghost. I said, no, it's Ghost. Um, and I actually asked my editor which was better, Ghost or Ghost. And it's the only time I've ever asked somebody whether a title was better, one of the two, because I've already come up with a title. And she was like, and she's a great editor. She's actually made me a much better author through the way she edits my work. And she said, make it Ghosts, because the ghosts can be, the Chechen terrorists and that sort of stuff in the Arctic fog and that sort of stuff. But they can also be all the ghosts of Damien's past,
Yeah.
sort of coming through him and, ways trying to deal with it or really not deal with it,
Yeah.
which
That's
all
awesome.
veterans go through for a period of time, obviously, till you realize you should probably go get it sorted.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. And that's welded through the books as well. It's his starting to basically, that initial thing of veterans where you don't deal with it. It's someone else's problem, obviously. And that is Damien in the first two novels. And then he starts to sort of grow and change. And because he meets somebody in Ghost in the Fog, there's actually a female character well, I have a lot of female characters, but he actually meets, his base, who will become his sort of other half, into the preceding novels. So she doesn't appear very often, but she's always there. And I actually embedded her from feedback from female readers. They're like, oh, we would like a love interest for Damien Hunter. It's like, okay, I can do that. It's not hard to do. Obviously, just sort of create that scene and weld it in. So, and then I realized that I could use her as a vehicle for his mental journey, and his sort of health and stuff like that. So, and the third novel, which is called Long Surrender, is set back in Afghanistan again. And it's probably the last one I'll probably set in Afghanistan realistically, because it has appeared in two novels already. And basically, Taipan have left someone behind, and I can't say who they've left behind, obviously, but they've realised they've left somebody behind, and they don't do that. That nice sort of American sort of way, or really that good service way. You don't leave anyone behind, and they didn't know they'd left someone behind, and they've been
Yeah.
in captivity for 3 years with the Afghanis and being sold and moved around, and because they're contractors, they don't exist, in reality. So yes, that person's had a particularly hard 3 years, and so Damien is basically contacted by a Taipan to go and get that person, but they have to do a side mission at the same time. That's in the Bamiyan province, which is sort of in the central highlands of Afghanistan, in there near the Hindu Kush there. And that's where it's all centers around that sort of area there. So, and so basically, because I've used the fact that the Taliban have taken over, which is reality now. And welded in a lot of sort of the gear that they've started to get going again, the helicopters they've got started going, because they still have pilots, those sort of things. And that's sort of Long Surrender. And the premise of that is of moving Damien back into the fold, and he's given no choice. And that is literally a running battle. So I have alpha and beta readers as well, as we all do. And they're basically, the feedback for them is, it is the best of the three. And they said, why didn't you make this one number one? I was like, I don't know, because I hadn't written it yet. So it gets quite highly rated, which is very nice for me, obviously. So that's where it sort of flows. And the undercurrent for the entire series is literally Damien's recovery, and the way he tries to sort of recover. And I've just got to weld in a little bit better. I go chat to some psychologist friends of mine, to try and give me a little bit more, sort of understanding of how that journey would be and how I could weld it into somebody who literally is not interested because they don't think they've got a problem, even though they're being told they do.
Yeah.
So that's where the series is going to go. And the last book is called Resurrection, which is him recovering, as much as he's ever going to recover, as veterans do. Okay. And so that's where basically we're going. It's going to be literally there's literally 2 missions per book in reality, the starting mission and the main mission. And Rayner, who's the French contractor, ex-French Foreign Legion contractor, he appears about second book, but he's mentioned in every book. So, because I didn't want to overuse him as a character, because he is a psychopathic character. He's a psychopath completely. No regard for human life, no regard for anything. He just makes money, And there are people who like that. That's what they do, And they either have short life expectancies or long ones in the weird sort of way of how the world works.
Yep.
So I created him in that really psychopathic way, with low human empathy. So he's a real So even though Damien Hunter he's not a squeaky clean person because he's a PMC. He does whatever his company asks him to do or, contracts him to do. So, but he has a level of sort of compassion in him, sort of built in naturally. And I use that to offset with Rainer as a character who has none of that, literally none, so. And there's some nice little twists and stuff in the storyline, how it all sort of flows up because that's what you've got to do. You've got to write that in there for a bit of interest.
Yeah.
So that's where the series will go. And basically still following that military thriller sort of theme and my sort of natural style where I don't want you to breathe literally from page 1 to the end. I want you to be continuously entertained from start to finish.
So Nathan, before I let you go, I want you to tell everybody where they can go to find more about you and to be in the know about the next releases so they can stay on, about the newest info about the Damien Hunter and the Battleborn, book and the series you got coming out. So give them your social media, your website, all that good stuff.
Yeah, so nathanbestauthor.com is my website. You can find me on Instagram as well, Nathan Best Author is there. Facebook is Nathan Best Author again, so I've kept that nice sort of theme. I do have a Twitter account, although I don't use it because I really don't like Twitter, but it's there. It's not my sort of thing. So they're my main sort of platforms. So nathanbestauthor.com, and then into Instagram and then Facebook as well. And that's where you'll find, I use Instagram as a little bit of, sort of showing people my life. And in addition to being an author, so you get author stuff and a little bit of our stuff. Facebook's a bit of a smattering of things, and obviously the website is the main real site. So, and I also have my own line of coffee, which goes with the Damien Hunter series. So I brought that, evaluating. There's t-shirts as well, So what I did was I treated it like a product, So and they're available through Australian Warfighter Coffee. And Australian Warfighter Coffee appears in every single novel because that's what Damien drinks. So he now has his own brand of coffee, which is called Taipan 16, and the t-shirts are Taipan 16 as well. So I've sort of value added to how it goes, and that's all linked out on my website as well. So that's where people can find me. It's cool. Just look for Nathan Best, not for the and there's a Nathan Best in America, who's he's a pastor or something like that, and he's quite evangelical. So that's not me. It's I'm the Australian guy.
Well, Nathan, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for carving out time to do this. I wish you the best of luck with the Battleborn book and the series. And just again, thanks, man, for coming on.